With I think a lot of people is almost construed as back Vince Gill had. It all 21 number 1 hits, 22 Grammys, the golden voice of country music, but in 2000 he did something that turned half his fans against him. He married Amy Grant. Both had just divorced their spouses. The Christian community called it adultery. Radio stations banned their music. Protesters showed up at his concerts with hate signs. 25 years later the health problems keep coming. At 67, the man who had everything is watching it slip away. Vince Gill was born on April 12, 1957 in Norman, Oklahoma, into a home where law and music collided in the strangest way. His father, a federal judge, could also play the banjo, guitar and harmonica like a seasoned bluegrass veteran. Sometimes after courtroom sessions, Judge Gill would come home and jump into late-night jam sessions with his wife Jiren, who played harmonica too. Vince used to lie in bed listening to their music drift down the hallway. Neighbors still talk about those summer nights when the sound of guitars and harmonias spilled out onto the streets. This odd mix of courtroom seriousness and porch-picking joy left a deep mark on Vince's soul. But growing up wasn't easy. Vince was born with crossed eyes. It wasn't just a minor issue, it required 2 painful surgeries. Even after that, his left eye still wandered when he was tired or upset. He later admitted that he started wearing glasses not just to see better but to hide the eye that made him feel broken. As a kid, classmates teased him so much that he started avoiding people altogether. Instead, he stayed home locked in with his guitar. He wasn't running from the world, he was building a new one. When Vince was 10, tragedy hit hard. His half-brother Bob got into a terrible car crash on a rainy highway outside Oklahoma City. Bob, once a bright student and a promising athlete, was left with brain damage so severe that he couldn't even remember people's names for over 25 years. Bob needed full-time care. Judge Gill had to take on extra legal work to pay for it all. Vince watched his parents' marriage crack under the pressure. Bob finally died in 1993 from a heart attack caused by his injuries. That pain never left Vince years later. He said those moments taught him what it meant to really lose something. That pain poured into his songs, the kind that make people cry quietly in their cars. At age 5, during a visit to his grandmother's house, Vince picked up her old acoustic guitar and started trying to play Old Shep. In 30 minutes, without a single lesson, he figured out the chords and began to sing. His grandma was stunned and called Vince's parents, telling them she'd just seen something rare. By the time Vince turned 10, his family had scraped together enough to buy him a Gibson ES-335 electric guitar. That guitar cost nearly $800 in 1967, equal to about $6,500 today, and it wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration. Vince wasn't just a kid with a hobby, he was a musician. Music became his escape when things got rough at home. Vince didn't lash out, he disappeared into his guitar. He spent 6 to 8 hours a day playing, mostly alone in the basement. Friends and family recall hearing sad emotional tunes echoing through the walls. His music teacher later wrote that Vince had a deep aching sound in his playing, something far beyond his age. He didn't talk about pain, he turned it into melody. By high school, Vince had started a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke. On March 4, 1976, something surreal happened. They opened for Kiss, Yes Kiss, the makeup-wearing rock monsters. The show took place at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, and the crowd didn't know what to make of a bunch of kids playing bluegrass. They wanted fire and leather. Instead, they got fiddles and banjos. The crowd booed, they threw cups, someone even threw shoes. Vince snapped. He flipped the crowd off, mooned them, and stormed off stage. It was raw, embarrassing, and unforgettable. After that chaos, the band fell apart, but Vince didn't give up. He moved to Kentucky and joined Bluegrass Alliance. By 1977, he was in a band called Boone Creek, playing with a young Ricky Skaggs. The two of them lit up the bluegrass scene. Even though the group didn't last long, their style helped create a new sound, mixing old-school bluegrass with modern edge. That band's one album, recorded in 1977, is now a cult favorite. People still talk about it like they discovered buried treasure. Later that same year, Vince packed up again, this time heading west. He landed in Los Angeles and joined Sundance. A band led by fiddle legend Byron Berlin. Berlin was no joke. He'd played with Bill Monroe and the Flying Burrito Brothers. He expected perfection. Vince learned fast. They played the Palomino Club, one of La's iconic venues, and rubbed shoulders with legends like Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. Less than a year after being booed off stage, Vince was now performing with Grammy-winning musicians. That kind of Bounce Back takes serious guts in September 1978. Pure Prairie League was falling apart. Their lead singer Larry Goshorn had just left along with his brother to start a new band. The group, now made up of no original members, was desperate to survive. They began holding auditions, hoping to find someone who could keep the music alive. That's when a young bluegrass musician named Vince Gill re-entered their lives 2 years earlier in 1976. Gill had opened for Pure Prairie League with his band Mountain Smoke in Oklahoma City. They noticed him immediately. He was only 19, but his talent stood out. They offered him a spot back then, but he said no. Bluegrass was still his passion. Now in 1978 he was in Los Angeles playing with Byron Berlin and Sundance. One night he jammed again with Pure Prairie League. Within hours they offered him the job. This time he said yes. Jeff Reeder, the band's sound man, remembered it clearly. We had seen him play in 1976, but he was committed to bluegrass. When he came back in 1978 we knew he was the one. Vince Gill became the new frontman. He wasn't just singing, he was playing guitar, mandolin, and fiddle, anything with strings. At 21 he was stepping into a bigger spotlight than ever before. By 1979 the band was recording their next album, Can't Hold Back, in Miami at Criteria Studios. It would be their 7th studio album, but the first with Gill as a full-time member. His presence changed everything. His voice added something smooth and emotional. He also started writing songs blending country warmth with pop melodies. The band's longtime member Michael Riley said it best: he was a breath of fresh air. The album didn't become a huge hit, but it gave the band new life, and for Vince it was the beginning of something much bigger. Then came 1980. That's when things exploded. The band released Firing Up, and it included their biggest hit ever, Let Me Love You Tonight. The song shot up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gill sang lead, and his voice carried the entire track. They even brought in jazz legend David Sanborn to play saxophone. It was smooth, catchy, and fresh. Vince didn't stop there. He wrote I'm Almost Ready and 5 more songs on that same album: She's All Mine, You're My True Love, Lifetime of Nighttime, I'll Be Damned, and Jan Lou. The sound had shifted. It was now softer, more polished, and leaning into country pop, and Vince Gill was leading that change. But good runs don't always last. In 1981 they released Something in the Night. It had a minor hit, Still Right Here in My Heart, but the album didn't connect like the last one. Then Disaster hit behind the scenes. Casablanca Records, their label, went bankrupt and was sold to Polygram. The new owners dropped most of the roster, including Pure Prairie League. Without a label and with disappointing sales, the band was stuck. Vince Gill and guitarist Jeff Wilson left in early 1982. Gill had already caught attention as a solo artist, and soon after he signed with RCA Records. Pure Prairie League brought in Gary Burr to replace him, but the magic was gone. The momentum was lost. Vince's time with the band was over, but his solo journey was just beginning. During this same period something else happened that would shape his life forever. In California, while building his music career, Vince met Janice Oliver. She was part of the country duo Sweethearts of the Rodeo. They started out as friends in the music scene, but things quickly grew serious. In 1980 they got married. 2 years later, on May 5, 1982, their daughter Jennifer Duran Gill was born. In 1982 Vince Gill thought he was on the verge of something big. His song Let Me Love You Tonight had gotten attention, and he felt sure his solo career was about to take off. So when Rodney Crowell invited him to join his band the Cherry Bombs, Gill said no. He wanted to make it on his own, but the music world can be cruel. As the year went on his momentum faded. His songs didn't chart, gigs dried up, confidence turned to doubt. By the end of the year Gill was struggling so early. In 1983 he called Crowell back and accepted the offer. Joining the Cherry Bombs turned out to be the smartest move he could have made. This wasn't just any backup band, it was a powerhouse group of musicians including Tony Brown and Emery Gordy Jr., names that would later shape the sound of country music. The band was on the road, constantly playing close to 200 shows a year. It was exhausting but educational. Gill sharpened his guitar skills, improved his stage presence, and made connections that would pay off for the rest of his life. He learned how to survive in the industry not by chasing fame but by playing the long game. That same year Vince made a bold move. He packed up his life in Los Angeles and moved to Nashville with his wife Janice and their young daughter Jennifer. It wasn't glamorous, money was tight. They lived in a small rental house and Vince took any job he could get. One of those jobs was playing guitar for Roseanne Cash, who was married to Crowell at the time that tour in 1983 became his. Classroom Cash's band was tight, polished and demanding. Vince had to grow up fast. On stage and at home, balancing fatherhood with late-night rehearsals. And uncertain paychecks wasn't easy, but those months in Nashville made him tougher, sharper and more focused. Meanwhile, Tony Brown, his old bandmate from the Cherry Bombs, was climbing the ranks in Nashville. By 1984, Brown had become head of A&R at RCA Records. He hadn't forgotten about Vince. He believed Gill had something special and he started pushing hard behind the scenes. Brown pitched Vince's demos to RCA's Joe Galante, calling in every favor he had. His efforts worked. In early 1984, Gill landed a solo deal with RCA. It wasn't just about talent, it was about trust. Brown knew Gill could deliver and he stuck his neck out to prove it. Vince didn't waste the chance. His first solo release, a 6-song EP called Turn Me Loose, came out in February 1984. 3 of the songs made it into the top 40. Victim of Life Circumstances reached number 34. It wasn't a smash hit, but it was enough to get people's attention. Gill spent long hours in Nashville's Woodland Studios recording with top session players. He didn't want filler tracks, he wanted every second to count. That dedication showed. The EP signaled that Gill wasn't just another hopeful voice in country music, he was a serious artist, ready for bigger stages. That same year, things got even better. On April 10, 1984, Gill was named the Academy of Country Music's top new male vocalist. It was his first major award, and for a moment it seemed like everything was finally falling into place. But fame didn't come overnight. His next album, The Things That Matter, dropped in 1985. It was good, but it didn't break through. Between 1984 and 1988, none of his